Okay, so today we are going to discuss about the legislative bodies, uh, which are actually involved in the accreditation process and which are involved in good laboratory practices. So this is what we are going to discuss today in our today's lecture. So there are several bodies, both locally and internationally, which are involved in good laboratory practices accreditation, and they also formulate the rules and regulations that these are the requirements for like each kind of laboratory. As we have discussed earlier, there are different kind of laboratories, including the biotech, the diagnostic one, the pharmaceutical one. So each kind of laboratory they have a different requirement, and there are different bodies which are actually involved in the accreditation process. So today we are going to discuss all those things that what are the local bodies in Pakistan and also what are the bodies overseas in different countries like in US, in Europe, in China, in Asian countries. So that's what we are going to discuss today. So do you know GLP refers to the set of principles that provide a framework for the proper conduct of laboratory studies. And this is like each of our lecture we discuss once again that GLP are important because what we are going to get are the uniform results in all the laboratories across the world with and that's like not only the uniform results, but on the other side, what we want to get are the accurate results, which are like more satisfactory for the customers. So this is what we are going to get from the good laboratory practices. Overall, it means that all the results we get either in Pakistan or in other countries, they can be reproduced in different laboratory settings. So we could get like uniform results. So that's the need of good laboratory. So what is like meant by these accreditation bodies? They go for standardization of the practices. There should be like the practice, and then we also have to ensure integrity of the research. So integrity even for the last
Yes.
lectures that we have discussed. Yes, Zawda Shah. The sorry for this. Um, So what we and even like as we were discussing that even in the last lecture that we were discussing in that uh, we actually go for the standardization of the practices that are very important because the ment is the same that we want to get a uniform results in all the laboratories. That's important, and we also have to ensure the integrity of the research. But why we have like the institutional review committees, why we have all those, even like in the last lecture we discussed about the animals, that what are the good laboratory practices for the animal research, and all these are meant that we should ensure the integrity of research. The data we are getting from different countries that could be like acceptable for all the other countries. There are some countries uh, there was like some questions about the integrity of the research. For example, like even for some of the Pakistani groups, there was like questions about the integrity. A few years back, if there is like research from China, there were questions on that research, but now they have improved their standards due to the GLP, good laboratory practices, and now uh, what results are getting from the China, they are also acceptable all over the world. So that's why the GLP are important because that ensure the integrity of the research. So primarily for regulatory purposes, like we use different bodies, for example, and that we are going to discuss in our coming slides, and they regulate all the laboratories, just like I was discussing the chemical ones, the diagnostic one, the pharmaceutical one, all the laboratories we have to regulate. So, what are the bodies in Pakistan? So, we are going to discuss that first. So, GLP in Pakistan, there are key regulatory bodies, including you are very much familiar about the PNAC, so Pakistan National Accreditation Council. So that's one of the body that actually regulate our different laboratories. So they accredit laboratory based on international GLP standards. So that's actually the responsibility of PNAC. They regulate your whatever the laboratory you are working. So they do the regulations of those. Another body which is also very important is the DRAP, that is Drug Regulatory Authority of Pakistan. So that ensure compliance with GLP for mainly the pharmaceutical studies, the clinical studies. That's actually under, and that comes under the DRAP, and we have to go to DRAP if we are going to conduct some research, the clinical one, if we are going to produce some pharmaceutical, and if we have to like go for different pharmaceutical industries, and the laboratories, the R&D even laboratories inside the pharmaceutical industry that goes under the DRAP. So PNAC is there, and then DRAP is there, and then there are some GLP accredited laboratories. They focus on like pharmaceutical, chemicals, and environmental. So there are some other laboratories which actually follow the international standards, and we have to. They actually help for the establishment of laboratory based on the international standards, and they are working for all different laboratories like environmental, chemicals, pharmaceuticals. So these are different, but mainly, in Pakistan is mainly PNAC and TRAP. They are the main bodies which actually go for regulations of the laboratories in Pakistan. And then, there are other bodies that depends on some specific requirement. Then HSA, health, sorry, the health department that also comes. So there are health related regulations. So if you have some specific laboratories. So, but they are like mainly they are regulated. The main bodies are PNAC and TRAC. So, in what are mainly the framework in Pakistan about the GLP is PNAC. So they follow ISO IEC 17025 accreditation standard for the testing and calibration of the labs. So that's one of like the thing that is done by the PNAC, and then through DRAP that actually enforce GLP compliance in pharmaceutical research, including clinical trials. The DRAP is mainly involved in the clinical trials and the pharmaceutical laboratories. And then there is this ISO 17025 is international standard for laboratory competence applied by Pakistan regulatory authority. So this is like the main uh, for the regulatory ones. There are so many other standards actually that we can have like better idea about those standards. So there are different standards, but this is mainly for the laboratory competence that is applied in Pakistan. So, what are this is important slide, and please pay attention to this. So, what is like GLP compliance in Pakistan? So, what are the steps for these accreditations? So, this is important. Like you have established a laboratory, that's a diagnostic laboratory. That like you have to understand which like accreditation bodies you have to go. It's if it is the pharmaceutical one, then you will go to DRAB. If it is not the pharmaceutical one, then you can go to the PNAC. So, what is the process? In this, we actually are going to discuss that. So, there's like these are the steps you have to send an application to PNAC or DRAP, and then they actually, if you will submit the application, they will give you a framework. So, whatever like a regulatory body, this is like I am sure you have got some idea about this. Like whenever you apply, they also share the application with you, and on that application there is a requirement. On all the application there are some specific requirements. For example, if you are going to establish a stem cell laboratory that you are going to use for that you are going to use for the clinical purposes, then that's also now initially it was regulated by HOTA, the Human Organ Transplant Authority in Pakistan, but now it's mainly it's regulated by the DRAP. So DRAP, if you want to establish that laboratory, what you do, you ask them that you are going to establish a laboratory, then they gives you an application. So on that application, they actually give all the requirements. So, for example, if you are going to establish a stem cell laboratory, then they will give you a requirement like this much space you should have like proper HVAC system installed. This should be the total area of the laboratory. And then you should have an expert, you should have a pharmaceutical person, you should have like person who will go for the sampling. So they have actually the list of all the people who will be working in their laboratory. They have a list of the equipment that these are the must equipment that should you should, for example, if you are going to establish a stem cell lab, then the requirement is you should have a biosafety cabinet, you should have a CO2 incubator, you should have a microscope, and these are like some basic requirement. And then there is a whole list of the requirement, like that depends on the application. If you are going to use for the like transplantation purposes, then there are many other requirements that depends like what application. So the idea is like either whatever body you go, either you are going to the DRAP or you are going to the PNAC. Whenever you want to establish the laboratory, they give you the requirement, and then you go for the like self-assessment and review, like how much space is needed, where should be the laboratory located, or do you have all the personals working in the laboratory? Do you have the required equipment? And if like you are satisfied with all the arrangement, then they go for the site inspection and documentation review. So then the officials from PNAC or DRAB, they visit your site, and they actually see that all the persons are there. The laboratory meet the standards, like all the windows are there. There are place for the hand washing. There is a place, all the like uh, waste containers are there, they are properly labeled. So whatever the requirement, so there is a whole list of requirement. Do you fulfill that requirement, then they do the site inspection and review all the documentation, your protocols, your procedure, your SOPs, they follow those. And then if it is up to the standard, then you pay the fee initially when you will submit the application. So along with the application, you submit the fee, and then they will review it, and then they will give their decision that either your laboratory is okay, or if there is like further requirement, they ask you that okay, this week this equipment is missing, so you have to add that equipment. This personal is missing, so you have to add that expert in your laboratory, and then they will review it once again, and then if all the requirements are done, then they approve. What are the challenges? Mm, Challenges are there are limited awareness among the smaller laboratories. You know, all the bigger brands in Pakistan, like we have the name, for example, in the government sectors, all the big hospitals. In the private sectors, like we have the Indus Laboratory, we have Chuktais is there, and we have the other laboratories and Shokahana laboratories. They know what are the requirements, but there are so many, right now, there's a mushroom growth of laboratories in Pakistan. Wherever you go, in East Street, you can find the laboratory. Either there's like from they are the collection centers, or they are some private laboratories, and each hospital, even the very small hospital, they have their own laboratories. So, those laboratories, they are not aware about the requirements. So, whenever you have applied, if it is standardized lab, just like I have talked about some of the names, they are the standardized one. They know what are the requirements, and they have fulfilled it. And you can see, like whenever you visit those laboratories, they have put their certificates at the back that these are the approved one from the health commission, they are approved from the DRAP, they are approved from PNAC, and they are like ISO, what are like some specific regulations required. So they are the certified one, you can see. But in all the private one, you can hardly find. So they are certified from the health commission, that they can open the laboratory, and they have a very limited requirement. But if you have like the international accreditation body, there are very few laboratories in Pakistan of international standard. Only very few, like in Arha and Shogahana. There are some of the laboratories. There are some international like pathology, regulatory authorities, and they are up to their standards, and they review it, and then so if it is standardized, then that actually give more worth to that laboratory. So this is like one of the challenge that among the smaller laboratories there is limited awareness, and then the bigger thing that you all people are very much aware is the cost. You know, like if we have to make it a standardized one, And if it is you are from a smaller area, for example, you are from a small town, for example, you can take the example of my own town, like Alipur Chatta, or if we talk about some other area in Pakistan, then there are so many challenges. For example, in those areas, people can't afford the expensive tests. If we follow all the national international standards, then that definitely increase the cost. Like you should use all the international standard chemicals. You should use all the international standard kits and equipment, and you have to run all the like protocols and procedures. That will add the cost. For example, if you can run the test in 100 rupees and if your lab is fully compliant, then that will definitely add to the cost. But what advantages gives advantages are like you meet international standard and your test results are of international standard, they will be acceptable all over the world. If it is like it, but what disadvantage it has is increase the cost. Like if it is 100 rupees test, it will add like 300 400 more in that if you will follow all the. So in most of the laboratories in like rural areas or in towns and in peripheries, they actually uh, don't follow those international standards. So sometimes their results are really really bad. And uh, like I was a few days, I can share one example. So I was like visiting my village. It was like around 6 months ago, and then somebody called me, and they were so much worried that they want to discuss something. So they came to my house, and I was like, they were so much worried, and they were asking me that we have to show you something, and it's really bad. So we went to a local laboratory, and they had tested this person, this young guy, and that is HIV positive. So they are so worried, and their family is so much worried, and they are so worried. So I asked them, don't worry. You can go to the test to some other laboratory, and let's see if it is positive. Then we should worry. And then on the next day, they went to Gujranwala then for the testing, and they gave the sample to two more laboratories, and they tested it, and fortunately, that person was HIV negative. So, like this is how if it is like sometimes you can get a false positive, and if it is of international standard, if you are like following all the international protocols, procedures that we have discussed earlier as well, so in that case, there are very much minimum chances that you can get a false negative or false positive. So the chances of getting the false results are very minimum in that case. So this is the procedure that we have discussed. This is how we actually go to these bodies, and then these are the challenges that we are facing. So now we are going to discuss the international GLP bodies. So what are different bodies? So that OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, that's the main body actually which has facilitated this process of good laboratory practices all over the world. This is the main organization which was uh, uh, of the view that all the laboratories of different like sectors, diagnostic, pharmaceutical, and all the others, the chemical and biological laboratories, they should follow the GLP. And that actually started the movement. And then they started convincing different countries, and so they actually uh, use those protocols, procedures, and international standards. So OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, set GLP guidelines for all the member countries. And then, for the US, the very famous one is the FDA. So everybody talk, oh, this drug is FDA approved or not. This is like all the time we are hearing this. So FDA is the Food and Drug Administration, and this of the US. It's like they follow very high international standards and the national standards. So so this is like they've that's of the US, and then there are overseas GLP in preclinical studies. So the FDA actually oversee the good laboratory practices in preclinical studies. So whatever the preclinical studies or the clinical studies are done in the US, they are under the FDA. Then in Europe is the European Medicine Agency (EMA). So EMA ensures GLP compliance for pharmaceutical testing in Europe. So this is mainly working. So EMA is mainly working for the Europe, and FDA is mainly working for the US. And if it is like something is approved by the FDA, then it's very hard. It's very easy actually to go for in other countries because they have a very high international standard and high national standard in US. So it's very easy. Like all they are almost following all the international guidelines. So if it is something approved in US, then it's very easily. For example, if drug is approved in US, uh, if we can take the example of Swaldi, for example, or Appaloosa for the treatment of hepatitis C. So that's Gilead is a U.S. company which is working on these drugs, and they have done rigorous trials in U.S. and that's approved by the FDA. If it is approved by the FDA, then it can be easily approved in Pakistan through DRAP because FDA, they follow very high international standards. So these are the international bodies. So there is OECD, as we have discussed, the body, the Economic Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. So actually, they have a compliance monitoring program in different countries. This bodies has so many member countries, over 100 member countries, I think. I have to check. I'm not sure yet, but we can definitely check it, and you can also check and share with me. So OECD actually they have set a standard for all the international countries. So the key features include that it ensures consistent application of GLP internationally in all the countries which follow the OECD guidelines. And then it oversees laboratory inspections and others. So it do the others in different countries of the world. So if it is like some laboratories OECD accredited, then that's of the international. So there are some participating countries, over 30 countries, including the US, Japan, Canada, and EU countries. They are OECD. They are following the OECD. So first, I think it started in New Zealand, and then in some European countries, and then so many other countries, including like just like the number is given that over 30 countries, including the US, Japan, Canada, and European countries. EU is the European countries. They follow the OECD GLP compliance. So this is the main body which actually oversees the things uh, globally. So what is the role of FDA, uh, uh, the US body in good laboratory practices? So there are FDA is quite famous as we have discussed earlier. FDA GLP guidelines. So these enforced for clinical testing of drugs, biologicals, and medical devices. So it's not only related to the drugs. It's mainly like we see FDA requirement for the drugs, but it's beyond the drugs. It's go for the biologicals. The biologicals they are becoming very famous these days, like the stem cell therapy, the exosomes, the other important growth factors and other uh, proteins. So these are called the biologicals. So they also regulate the drugs as well as biologicals and medical devices. And it ensures studies conducted for FDA approval follow standardized practices. So the requirement is the same. Like if you have to run some trial, you send the application, they actually review it, and they see it that everything is of international standard, just like we had discussed for Pakistan. They see that you have proper like planning of the study, all the experts are there, it is approved by the institutional committees, and you have the required equipment, and then you share the results with the FDA, and then if it is like they review it thoroughly once again, and then they go for the approval. What is the importance of FDA GLP compliance? It protect public health by ensuring reliable safety data. So it's very hard actually to get approval from the FDA for any drug. So they actually want a very rigorous testing of the drug. So it's not like you have to proper like plan the studies for the preclinical study testing. Like you have to have show the data first for your laboratory studies on the cells, and then you go for the animal trials, and then phase one clinical trials, and then phase two clinical trials, and then phase three clinical trials. And after like each from each step, you get the approval. You share the data with FDA, and then they review it. And if they allow you for like going for the phase two trial, then you only then you can go for the phase two. Otherwise, you can't go for the phase two trial. And then if it is like they are satisfied for the phase two trial, then only then you can go for the phase three trial. And if it is like phase three trial approved, then you can go for the first phase of like go to the public, and then even then you have to give the safety data, and after some time that is like approved nationally and internationally. So this is how they follow stringent protocols, and this is the same like case it should be for all the other countries, that they should follow these proper guidelines. So we were discussing about OECD, and then we have discussed about FDA, and then let's discuss about the European Medical Agency, and then see what are their requirements. So we have to wait for a while because there is some problem with the. I'm not sure. Okay, luckily it actually got stuck, and then it's back now. So now we are going to discuss about the European Medical Agency and what is their role. So EMA is the European one, and that ensures GLP standards for the testing of medicine in Europe, just like we have discussed about the FDA in US, and then OECD in the member countries of over 30 countries, which actually follow the OECD guidelines. So similarly, for Europe, they have their own specific guidelines that ensures GLP standards. And their focus areas are the preclinical and clinical trial data integrity. So just like if you have to go for a study in US, you have to go to the FDA, and if you have to go for some study, just like we were discussing different trials of the drugs, they are like either going to treat Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or whatever like uh, disease you are going to target. Then you have to go for EMA, and they have the protocols is very similar for all these bodies. You apply them, they review your work, and then they allow you for certain like testing, and then you have to share the data, and then they go for the next phase. So, like the EMA go for preclinical as well as the clinical trial, and they go for the data integrity that all the trials they are conducted. For example, if you are getting some results in some population with some protocol in one of the European country, then it might not work in other European country. So EM ensures that if it is like whatever work you are going to done, for example, you are going to done in do the work in Poland, or you are going to do the work in Austria or in Italy. If it is EM approved, then those protocols, all the European countries, if you have to like use the drugs or the studies in Spain or in Portugal or in Netherlands or in Belgium, so whatever country, they if it is like EM approved, then they will follow the same guidelines, and they will get like the data will be they can freely use those drugs if it is like of EMA approved, and EMA ensures the good laboratory practices. So it also promotes harmonization of GLP standards across. This is like what we have just discussed. That if it is approved EMA in one of the country, then all European countries follow because they ensure that it follows the international standards. So then there are regional GLP monitoring authorities. All the different countries they have their own authorities. China, for example. So in China there is NMPA, that is National Medical Product Administration. Just like we have FDA in US, we have NMPA in China, and it monitors the GLP for drug safety studies. So this is for the China, and for India we have NGCMA, that is National GLP Compliance Monitoring Authority. just like we have PNAC in Pakistan. So they actually do enforce GLP for laboratories in India. And for Brazil, there is ANVISA, that is National Health Surveillance Agency, that ensure GLP in health related studies in Brazil. So, like, there are some bodies which are regional bodies, which actually ensure the regional studies, just like we have discussed the EMA that is in Europe. So that's a regional body that specifically work with the Europe. And then there are national bodies, and then there are international bodies. So each country has their own regulatory. And like sometimes it happens like if a drug is approved, for example, in China, then you have to reapprove in in the other countries. Like if you have to send the drug to the Europe, then you have to get the approval once again to EMA, and then you can sell the drug or use those protocols in Europe. So if it is like, as I mentioned, that if it is done with the EMA or with the FDA, then that is of very high international standard, and then it can be easily translated in so many other countries. But if the approved by like in China or in India and Brazil, then if you have to use that drugs in US, for example, it's very hard. You have to once again follow all their guidelines, and only then that is approved in their respective country. It is not like approved very easily in those countries. So this is about the regional GLP. And then let's go to the next slide. And once again, there is the PowerPoint is not responding. There is some problem with my computer, unfortunately. I'll try to fix it, and it often happens. So comparison of GLP accreditation in Pakistan versus internationally. So this is a short slide that will give you an idea about different bodies. So in Pakistani, these are, for example, on the above you can see the accreditation bodies. Just like in Pakistan, we have PNAG or we have DRAP. Internationally, there are different bodies, just like we have discussed about OECD, FTA, EMA, and all the other bodies. They work internationally. What are their focus areas? Their focus areas are different. For example, we have focus areas in Pakistan. If it is pharmaceutical, it's mainly come under DRAP. And PNAC actually aggregate almost all different kind of laboratories, and it's chemical, biological, it's the diagnostic one. So they can be regulated by the PNAC because they have set different standards, and we have to follow those. And similarly, internationally, there are different bodies which actually go for pharmaceuticals, and chemicals, and cosmetics, and food. In Pakistan, for cosmetics, still we are working on different guidelines. And then global recognition is like, emerging for Pakistani bodies, just like we have discussed in previous slide, that if it is done in like developing countries, it's very hard that that is accepted internationally. But these one, the OECD, FTA, EMA, or the Chinese one, they have well established and global accepted. So once your laboratory is approved by these bodies, even like in Pakistan, if your laboratory is accredited by OECD, then you can use the similar, like that is of international standard, and those will be accepted internationally. So yes, so we have very short time, so let's go to the conclusion of the what we have discussed so far. So Pakistan progress so far. Pakistan is moving towards full GLP compliance through PNAC and DRAP, although challenges remain, and this is what we have discussed right now. What are the challenges we are facing in Pakistan? They are mainly of like there are so many laboratories in Pakistan, especially in villages, and they are on one side they are unaware about these international and national, and on the other side, if they follow these guidelines, then it will be very expensive. And then global standardization, so international bodies like OECD, FDA, and EMA play a crucial role in ensuring global compliance. So these are the international ones. So and then in future, increase awareness and investment in Pakistan GLP adherence. That's like one of the requirement that we have to uh, we have to like add more awareness, and that's why your course is very important. At least you should have an understanding about the processes and international. So you like whatever bodies, whatever accreditation, just like in the start, I think SIP, EIS, Siptul Hassan, he asked me that they wanted to go for some accreditation and for their laboratories. So you at least you should have the understanding that these are the accreditation requirement for our laboratories, and this is a procedure that you have to follow. And these are the international bodies, and they have like they have even more requirements. So if it is like PNAC or DRAB, they are the requirement as they don't have those that much stringent requirement. Although they have like requirement, but that's not that much stringent. And then there is a need of collaboration with international regulatory authorities, and that will improve laboratory practices in Pakistan. And this is like very important step that we have to take. That we should like collaborate with the international bodies, just like with the Chinese one, we can easily do. Then with the Europe and US, and that what are their requirements. Mostly, this is like what we do in Pakistan, by the way. That if we have to establish some laboratory and if we have to follow those guidelines, initially we get those, and then we make it as per the requirement for Pakistan. So this is how we definitely proceed.